Hello and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republicans podcast. We're really glad you joined us. And as you know, the podcast, the purpose of it is to get to know the legislators that you sent to the State House. And what do we want to know about them? Well, how they serve their community, why they ran, what committees they're on, what bills they're running, just to get to know them on a little personal level. So today we're really pleased to have Britt Raybould, Representative Britt Raybould with us, and she represents Legislative District 34, Seat B. She's in her second consecutive term, but you have served 3 terms. This is your 3rd term that you're serving. And just welcome to the Idaho House Republicans podcast, Representative Britt Raybould.
Well, Victor, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today.
So let's talk a little bit about you, if I could just introduce you. You were born and raised in Idaho. You're a graduate of Sugar Salem High School in Sugar, Idaho. I love that. You're a graduate of BSU, Westminster College. You're the CFO of Raybould Brothers Farms, and you're the founder of Right Bold Consulting Firm. And you are a past president of the National Potato Council. There's a lot of potatoes in the lobby down there.
That's true. The Potato Commission is in the building.
Yeah. Did you coordinate that for this episode? Or?
I wish I could take credit for that, but it's very much the Potato Commission's operation.
Well, there you go. So anyway, thank you for coming, and maybe a little bit background on you. Tell us about Legislative District 34. What is it like? What are the people like? What are the concerns of Legislative District 34?
So for the people who are not as familiar with the legislative map, 34 is comprised of Madison County in East Idaho. That's the Rexburg area. We are one of the only legislative districts in the state that is self-contained within a single county, and the county represents our legislative boundaries. It does make it easy to say when you represent your district, we are representing Madison County at the same time. So it works really well. The district is made up of a mix of healthcare, education, and agriculture. Rexburg is also the location for BYU Idaho, so we have a lot of students who come in on a regular basis and manage to fill up the town. But we also are a center for healthcare with the increased expansion of healthcare services and specialties. And then, of course, we have our ongoing historical contributions from agriculture in our community, too.
So, Representative Raybould, why did you decide you wanted to get into politics? What was your motivation to run?
I've been very blessed. There's no question that I have had a lot of opportunities in life, and it has stemmed in large part from the willingness of my family to participate and be a part of this process in different ways. And I looked at it and decided that if I wanted things to continue to be good, I needed to show up and I needed to do my part and give back. So it is very much a sense of duty. Of if I want things to continue to be good, I also need to be prepared to do the work.
And so tell people about your family's farming legacy. That's obviously when you say you've been very blessed and you can be able to do this. I imagine part of the fact is that you have been well established and you have this farming legacy. Tell people a little bit about that.
So my brother and I represent the 3rd generation of our family that is in our farming operation. My grandfather started it in partnership with his brother and with my father. And over time, it grew out of the Rexburg bench, and we now have a farming operation that is on the Ejim bench as well, and we do a little over 2,300 acres. We grow a mix of potatoes, malt barley, and alfalfa. And if you haven't had the opportunity to work in a family farming operation, let me tell you, it's something special to be able to go to work with your family every day, because you get the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's family, but at the same time, you still have a business you have to operate and make successful.
Right, and it's a great legacy, and it's certainly going to teach you a work ethic.
No question. I can remember back in the day when my father would drop my brother and I off, and it would be, you need to go out into the potato patch and pull the sunflowers. And we thought we were really clever by figuring out how to just step on the stalk of the sunflower, that my dad wouldn't figure out that we hadn't actually pulled them. We should have given him more credit.
Well, you don't want to time out at the farm. That's not a good thing. So let's talk a little bit about the committees that you're on. What committees do you represent or are you a member of here at the State House?
So I'm assigned to serve on the Revenue and Taxation Committee, the Resources and Conservation Committee, and then the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee. On Revenue and Taxation, we're dealing with tax policy for the state. On Resources and Conservation, it's anything to do with public lands, water, Department of Fish and Game, and the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee is going to be involved with DEQ, so water quality issues, environmental issues. Those are the kinds of things that would come before that committee.
And it sounds like your background is well suited for all 3 committees.
I've been able to draw on some direct experience to apply to my work in those committees, yes.
Yes, so a little bit about your consulting firm. Tell us about that.
So I have a background in communications and had worked in marketing for almost 10 years and was in a position where I could go out on my own and start my own consulting firm. And so had been in essentially kind of looking at it as there are small businesses who need the kind of services that I provide, whether you're thinking in terms of like marketing for a website or business strategy to go out and expand your operation, but didn't necessarily need someone on staff full time. And so I was providing that level of service on a one-on-one basis for different operations that were looking for that kind of specific assistance.
Hey, if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Idaho House Republicans podcast, and we're being joined today by Representative Britt Raybould, who represents Legislative District 34 in Seat B. So let's talk about, obviously, this is your third term. Are there any particular, let's talk about the past, then we want to talk about a bill that you're working on right now, which is important. But are there any bills that you co-sponsored or that you were part of in the past legislatures that you were particularly proud of?
So I have to say the work that I've done as it relates to Idaho's water infrastructure has been both personally meaningful, but also has had a huge impact on the state as a whole.
Yes.
I don't know how many are watching who are aware of some of the issues that are going on to the south of us in the Colorado River Basin and the challenges that they're facing in renegotiating their 100-plus-year-old compact. I don't want Idaho to be in the same situation where we haven't done the level of preparation and been proactive to protect that valuable resource. And so all the work that I've done to help pursue additional investments in that infrastructure to protect it, to make sure that Idaho's water stays Idaho's water. Those are things that have been a high priority for me and that I'm very proud of.
So you were like the Robin to Scott Bedke's Batman on water?
Well, for the one difference being that once I start talking about water, I can stop for the most part. Lieutenant Governor Bedke, it might be a little harder.
That's legit. Although he's kind of earned the right. He's
No
done
question.
an amazing job.
Yeah, no question.
Protecting Idaho's water rights.
Heavily involved in trying to do what's right.
And the
only,
aquifer, recharging the aquifer.
And it's not even just about for today, but it's about for the future, because a lot of these things require preparation and planning now. These are not going to be things that we can put off and just hope we can take care of, when we're confronted with an emergency.
Amen. So now let's talk about House Bill 493, which is in the 2026 legislature. Now, it's a very tough subject.
Yes.
And sometimes we have to take on tough subjects. And we're going to talk about it very openly right here in our podcast. And that is legislation that makes the soliciting of commercial sexual activity a felony for anyone 21 years or older on a first offense. And the current law is what happens with a first offense.
It's a misdemeanor on your first offense under the current law. And then the second would be a felony. Yes.
Okay, felony. And now let's talk a little bit about just some crime statistics. So I actually looked into a report that's put out by the sheriffs and a lot of the police force in Idaho. It's called Crime in Idaho. The latest one we have is 2024. We don't have 2025 yet. But let's just go through some statistics which are real. Prostitution offenses in the last 5 years, 174 of them. So this is not a one-off thing that's happened. And there's also an interesting part of that crime report that talks about the crime clock. And it says there's a rape in the state every 13.8 hours, non-consensual sex offenses, excluding rape, every 7 hours, human trafficking, commercial sexual acts every month, pornography offenses every 21 hours, prostitution offenses every 12 days. This is a big issue. It's a very serious issue. What inspired you to take on this tough subject, and why are you running this bill?
So a few years back, the Attorney General produced a report that was looking at how we could resolve some of the issues that we have around human trafficking. And for those of folks who are watching who may have some prior awareness, we went in and did a rewrite of our human trafficking statute. However, one of the things that was left on the table was a recommendation that came out of that original report from the AG to change this particular provision of code and to remove the misdemeanor and to make it a felony on a first offense, looking at it very much as a question of supply and demand. So in essence, if the demand is lowered as a result of there being greater consequences for engaging in that behavior, the logic followed that there would be a potential decrease in supply because there would be no demand in order for that activity to happen. And so this is basically closing the loop on a recommendation that the Attorney General made several years ago.
So let's talk about what that was in your bill, which is House Bill 493. And it's called Relating to Commercial Sexual Activity, amending a section and revising the penalty for soliciting commercial sexual activity. So remind people, we just talked about it, but remind people, where were we and what was the recommendation and what's in your bill in terms of the penalty? for soliciting a commercial sexual activity?
So, on a first offense right now under existing law, if you are not just charged but convicted, it's a misdemeanor on a first offense. And I believe it's 5 days in jail. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what's in the current
Okay.
statute. Then, in the event that you are convicted of a second offense, then it would be charged as a felony on the second offense with a separate. Where we put in code for felony convictions is not necessarily always within that statute. And so it's referenced somewhere else. And if memory serves, I believe it's up to 5 years under existing law. Now, what the new law says is that if you are 18 to 20, and this stems from some conversations that happened in this building last year when I ran this as House Bill 88. There were concerns about the age and some potential confusion based on the age of the individuals about was the behavior in question, and could there be potential misunderstandings or whatever that might be. So when I brought back the bill this year, I specifically looked at and said, okay, if the concern is this teenager potentially going into college, potentially being in new situations,
Right.
let's account for that and leave in place the misdemeanor option for 18 to 20. But again, leaving also that second component of if you were to commit a second offense between the ages of 18 and 20, you would still have the possibility of being charged with a felony. What the biggest change is it says that as of the age of 21, on a first offense, you would be charged with a felony. And in this instance, I went back again based on feedback that I had received about the level of punishment that would have normally gone with it if we had just gone with what was in code, and dialed back the punishment a little bit and have said that if you are charged with a felony and convicted, the minimum sentence is 6 months and a fine of up to $10,000. Now, the judge could say that I think it should be longer, and I believe the maximum sentence is up to 3 years, but they are establishing a minimum. And I've had folks ask questions because there are some in the building that feel very strongly about a mandatory minimum and that ties the judge's hands.
Right.
This is essentially the lightest touch, I believe, that we can apply to a felony, while at the same time ensuring that it does carry actual teeth in terms of consequences. Because under the existing law, we're talking about a matter of days for being in jail, as opposed to this one where we're saying you could be in jail if convicted for a minimum of 6 months.
So let's just go through it as you said. So the misdemeanor violation, which would involve an 18 to 20-year-old, is a confinement of 5 days in jail, a minimum of 5 days in jail, and may be sentenced up to 1 year in jail or fined up to $2,000 or both. Soliciting commercial sexual activity shall be a felony, and that person would be sentenced to a minimum period of non-confinement of 6 months in jail and may be sentenced to up to 3 years in jail or fined up to $10,000 or both.
Yes.
The only part of the mandatory minimum is that the minimum side cannot be suspended.
Yes.
Okay. That's how the bill works. Okay. And then so tell us now the process of what's happening with the bill, because I don't think everyone's aware of the inside baseball of how a bill makes itself through to the being passed in the House, being passed in the Senate, and then to the governor's desk. So where did this bill start? What committee did it start in?
So the bill was introduced and had a hearing in Judiciary and Rules, which is chaired by Representative Bruce Skog.
Okay. So it came out of that committee. And what kind of vote did it get in that committee?
If memory serves, it was 9-4, and it came out with a do pass recommendation.
Okay. So then it goes to the House floor where it is right now, and I believe it's in its third reading.
Yes.
So can you tell people, what does that mean, the third reading? Is there a first? Is there a second? Is there 5, 10 readings? What does that mean? Help walk through people the process of that.
So we have a requirement under Idaho's Constitution that a bill has to be read. And what that means is essentially it has to be publicly moved through our calendar in a way that counts as it being read. Now, there are some who've interpreted that as the bill actually should be read, but for the purposes of moving the process along, we essentially just read it across the desk in our respective bodies, and that counts as read. That's why when we stand up to present a bill on the floor, you'll hear a representative ask that all further reading of the bill cease and that we commence with the debate of the bill. So we are following what the Constitution requires, while at the same time moving forward with the process of having the debate on the bill.
And what is the purpose of the 3 readings?
Think of it as you are providing people with public awareness of what's happening and where a bill is at. Now, you may find as we get further into the session that a bill will be on the second reading calendar, and there may be a vote or a motion made to say we want to bring up a bill from the second reading calendar, perhaps to meet a deadline to accommodate our colleagues in the Senate. And so we can have it is a counted vote in the sense of it has to be a supermajority to bring a bill up from the second reading calendar to consider it immediately. You may have seen us do that very thing when we met on the first day and had the governor come in and do the state of the state,
Yes.
right? We had to have the vote to say we're going to have consideration of this joint resolution that puts us into a joint session between the House and the Senate.
Perfect.
So,
And the third reading is the last reading that happens before it would be scheduled for a vote on the floor.
Once a bill has reached the third reading calendar, then it is considered appropriate and in order for that bill to be brought up for consideration during floor debate.
So tell us about your prognosis on the bill in the House. And then if it does pass through the House, how does it get to the Senate? Does it go through the same 3 readings? How does that work?
So I am optimistic that this bill will get through the House. House Bill 88 did last year. This bill this year includes some of the requests that were made of me to make some modifications to address concerns. So I have every reason to think that it will move forward as last year's bill did. When it goes over to the Senate, it will have to go through a committee process just like it did on the House. It will have to go to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, be reviewed by that committee, and then voted out of committee and then brought to the Senate floor, and again go through the same reading calendar timeline before it eventually is up for debate on the Senate floor. Assuming it passed the Senate, then it would be moved up to the governor's office, and he would have the choice as to whether to sign or to veto the legislation.
Well, thank you for explaining that so well. So we should be watching, everyone should be watching for House Bill 493. Again, the topic is legislation that makes soliciting commercial sexual activity a felony for anyone 21 years or older on the first offense. Previously, it was just a misdemeanor. Is there any other bills that you'd like to talk about that are kind of you're watching, or anything with water you're watching in this session?
I think the thing that I would tell people to pay attention to is what happens with tax conformity. So that's something that is in front of my...
With the big, beautiful bill.
With the big, beautiful bill.
Right.
But here's the interesting thing that I'm not sure most people know. We have to deal with tax conformity every year.
Right.
Because there are potential changes that come through from the federal tax code. And so this year, it just gets some extraordinary attention as a result of just how many layers there are to it. So there are the individual tax cuts, there are the business tax cuts. And right now, we're preparing to work through what that's going to look like for Idaho, because it's essentially taking a federal policy and saying, how do we want it to align with state tax policy?
Any guesses on any predictions on how that will turn out? Will we conform with all elements of the BBB? Or I've heard there's some parts that are retroactive we may not bring to fruition, but
I think there's so many moving parts on this that it's going to require more discussion. And I'm going to be really interested to hear the public testimony that comes forward when we finally do have a hearing on what's been proposed thus far, because I think there's some practical considerations that we're also going to have to work through, like, does the tax commission have enough time to get the new forms printed? What does the programming look like for them on the back end to be able to process tax returns and do so in line with whatever we pass, right? So those are just practical things.
That's a good point.
And then you've got the policy questions around what we want actual tax policy to look like for the state, because those are things we're going to have to be accountable to for as a part of our budget setting process. So we are going to have to know what revenues look like in conjunction with whatever we do with conformity. So it's
That
all
helps, doesn't it?
connected.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got to know what the revenues are to know what your budget's going to be, because we have to have a balanced budget here in Idaho, which we really like, by the way.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us on the Idaho House Republicans podcast. We've been joined by Representative Britt Raybould today, who represents Legislative District 34, Seat B. And it's just a pleasure getting to know you, and Godspeed on all your work, and Godspeed on House Bill 489.
Yes.
God bless.
Thank you so much, Victor. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And until the next episode, as we always say, God bless the great state of Idaho.
From timber towns to wheat field roads, different roads, but the same old hope. We bow our heads and we stand up tall, answering the people when due.